a flame in flight with haunting cause, bold raven mocking witches warn, how death will visit someone soon, as earth they sweep without a broom, for frail and failing human hearts. If raw, that muscle, when consumed, gives extra life to all those who can only be defeated by great healers whose prophetic eyes can see those ghouls for what they are. This is Carolina Haints. Welcome, dear listener, to the Carolina Haints podcast, brought to you by Wreak Havoc Productions and A Darker World. I'm your host, Dan Sellers. Native American mythology is full of spooky legends and ferocious monsters. From the Wendigo of the Great Lakes natives to the Skinwalker of the Navajo. These stories don't just act as cautionary tales for the youth. Plenty of Native Americans to this day will tell you that they're very real and not to be messed with. There's a Cherokee saying, "Beware the midnight ravens." Kanuna and Noya were by all appearances a typical elderly Cherokee couple. They lived alone, apart from the main Cherokee village, in a clearing deep in the Nantahala forest. On this day, Kanuna walked out of the forest carrying an armful of firewood. He caught his wife's eye and they exchanged a sly smile. Noya tended to their meager garden. It was small, but it provided everything they needed. He stacked the wood and then went over to help her. They've lived this way for more years than either of them could remember. Working the garden made Kanuna's old bones ache, but it was necessary work. But then the wind changed, and on it they both caught the scent of something. They stopped working and looked at each other. They put down their tools and stood. They each inhaled deeply, savoring the scent they smelled. It was coming from the northeast, toward the town of Cherokee. Without saying a word, they had done this so many times that they didn't need to speak. They each looked around, scouring the forest to make sure no one was around watching them. Then they walked inside. They settled down in their favorite chairs. Then they stepped out of their bodies. In this form, they are visible to human eyes, but, of course, they could easily see each other. Their magical selves, their true selves. They now only vaguely resembled anything human. They were gaunt and shriveled and wrinkled, hinting at the hundreds of years they hadn't been alive. Their fingers were longer than normal, especially the index finger, which had drawn out to twice the length of a normal man's. They were surrounded by a blood-red aura, and as they moved, they left trails of ember-colored sparks. Then they stepped outside and flew away. As they flew, a shower of sparks trailed behind them, but again, no one would have seen it. To the normal, waking world, nothing was there. A normal human wouldn't see a thing. They would just hear the sound of ravens screaming. As they cleared the treetops, two other pairs of beings also flew up over the forest, trailing sparks behind them as well. The six converged and flew toward the small village. The scent on the wind told them that someone was close to dying, their specialty. They walked through the wall of a cottage to find a young Cherokee brave in his early 20s lying on the bed, bleeding. The young man's wife is being consoled by the local medicine man. He tells her that her husband's injured himself while out on a hunt, but that wound is not serious. He tells her that the wound will heal, and they will have a long life together. The 6 beings stand beside the bed and contort their mouths into a strange facsimile of a smile. They know the truth to the medicine man's words. The wound is superficial. The young brave will live to hunt another 30 years, or at least he would have. They surrounded him, and each one laid their long index finger on the man, and as they did, he suddenly worsened. He struggled for breath, and the bleeding intensified. His wife gasped, and the medicine man ran to him, doing everything he could, but he quickly understood that there was nothing he could do, and he understood why. He could not see anyone else in the room, but he called to them, begging for the young brave's life. But they will not spare him. The temptation to take one so young is too great. So many years. Then Kanuna took out his magic knife, slit it between the man's ribs, and sliced him open. In the spectral plane where they now stood, no one, that is, no human, could see anything. They removed the man's heart and divided it into 6 portions. As they ate the man's heart, they devoured the years of his life that they stole. The young man would have lived another 30 years, so they divided these years between themselves. They would each live another 5. With their deed done, they walked back out through the wall and flew off into the night, leaving nothing in their wake but the sound of a raven screaming. Kanuna and Noya arrived back at their own cottage, looking again like normal Cherokee people. It was well after midnight. They shared a smile, kissed each other goodnight, and went to sleep, dreaming of the next opportunity to steal another life. They knew it wouldn't be so long. Someone is always getting injured or dying on the reservation, and they will always be there to capitalize on that. But what were they? According to Cherokee legend, they were a type of witch known as Akeliski, or the Raven Mockers, because of the raven noises they made when they flew. There were only 2 things that could destroy them. The first is that they ran out of stolen days, but with the 5 years they just consumed, that seemed unlikely to ever happen. The second is for someone to recognize them when they were in their human form. Again, unlikely, considering they were invisible. But if neither of these things came to pass, their curse would be broken, and they would die within 7 days. Sure enough, they didn't have to wait long. The scent came to them on the wind, a scent only they could smell. Kanuna and Noya smiled. It was time, again. This time from the south, from the town of Tamale. Again, they vanished and flew above the forest, meeting the 4 other raven mockers. Meanwhile, miles away, a man named Gunskaliski woke from a deep sleep. This was unusual. He wondered what woke him. He listened closely, trying to pick up an errant noise, the shuffle of an intruder, the grunt of a bear, the rustle of a brewing storm. But there was nothing. Then, just as he was about to lay back down, he heard it. The raven scream. Now he was wide awake. That was no ordinary raven. Only a handful of people on Earth could have seen the raven mockers in their true form, and Gunskaliski was one of them. After the medicine man told him what had happened to the other young brave, he had been preparing. He grabbed his bow and quiver. Not his regular hunting quiver, but the one full of arrows he had made especially for the raven mockers. Arrows made from a lightning-scarred ash tree, fire-hardened and infused with smoke from the evergreen. With bow and quiver in hand, He ran out of the door. But the question was, who were they there for? No one had reported being sick or injured. If they had, he would already be standing vigil over them. So who could it be? Then he remembered a senior councilwoman from the tribe. She had a bad cough this afternoon. She brushed it off as nothing, but beware the midnight ravens. He ran to her cottage. He notched one of his special arrows, and it immediately started to glow bright red. They were here. He burst in without knocking to find that the old woman's cough had definitely worsened. It sounded like pneumonia. Her daughter was tending to her and screamed when Gunskaliski rushed in. She was doing what she could for her mother, but she couldn't see the 6 raven mockers who had their fingers ready, drawing her closer to death. "Get down!" Gunskaliski yelled before her daughter could say anything. She did. He let his arrow fly at the closest witch and struck it true in the heart. It screamed and writhed a few seconds before exploding into an explosion of sparks. The daughter could see or hear none of this. She saw the arrow fly through the air and simply disappear. Confused and afraid, she stayed pinned to the floor. The remaining raven mockers looked at him with fear and anger, but they maintained their grip. The medicine man notched another arrow and shot the next one in the chest. He hit the third in the neck and the fourth in the arm. But where he hit them didn't matter. No arrow could kill the raven mockers, but these special arrows would disperse their energy, sending them back to wherever they had left their bodies. 2 witches remained, Kanuna and Noya. By now the councilwoman was dead, and they could see they would not be getting their prize. They exchanged a glance, and then fled out through the rear wall of the cottage. The tribe arranged for a quick burial of the body, and Gunskaliski stood vigil to ensure the witches didn't come back to retrieve the heart. The councilwoman would only truly be safe once she had been buried in a consecrated grave. Once buried, the medicine man told the council elders that he was going to hunt down the raven mockers. He swore that the reservation would be rid of them once and for all. Kanuna and Noya were pissed when they re-entered their bodies, and they knew that the other 4 witches would be equally upset, if not more so. They had been forced back to their bodies. That would have been a painful experience for them. The 2 didn't know the identity or location of the other 4, but all 6 of them shared a hatred of the medicine man. One day, he will be dying too. And on that day, their revenge would be the sweetest. As much as they would like to hunt him down and kill him tonight, they knew they had to be careful. They knew that if he recognized them to be the raven mockers when they were in their bodies, they would be doomed, and they knew that he knew it too. They could wait for revenge. 10 or 20 years may seem like a long time to you or I, but when you've lived for centuries, it's a trifle. They would all have to be careful, especially the other 4. The arrows that Gunskaliski shot them with not only sent them back to their bodies, but it also marked them, leaving a sort of scar that glowed blood red, like their aura. The medicine man would be able to see it. Gunskaliski began his investigation by walking the perimeter of the village, searching for char marks. The sparks coming from the raven mockers would have charred the leaves on the trees as they lowered into town. But only he could see it. It took him a full day, but he finally found the marks he was looking for. He now had a general direction. He would let his spirit guide him from there. It didn't take long the next day to find the first pair. They lived in a cottage in a clearing in the woods, much like Kanuna and Noya. He hid at the edge of the forest and watched the elderly couple go about their daily chores. The man was chopping wood and the woman doing laundry. Everything else was normal, but his magical sight told him otherwise. They both had a bright glow coming from beneath their shirts where he had shot them. The couple recognized the medicine man as he stepped out of the forest, but they pretended that they didn't. When he notched his arrow and they saw it glow bright red, they knew that he knew. They ran and he shot a couple of arrows after them, but he did not give chase. He didn't need to. The knowledge of who they were was enough to seal their fate. They would be dead within days. He burned their cottage and continued his search. That night he came across a camp. An old man was sitting next to his campfire taking a nap, or so it appeared. But the bright red scar on the man's arm told Gunskaliski what was really going on. The raven mocker was outside of its host body. This gave the medicine man a chance to test his third method to kill a raven mocker. He waited and waited. Sometime after midnight, he heard it, the sound of ravens. He got his arrows ready. As the witch landed close to its human body, Gunskaliski shot an arrow through the sleeping man's heart. The witch screamed and rushed Gunskaliski, but the arrow found its heart, if it had one. Again, the witch exploded into sparks, but this was different, brighter, more energetic, final. Without a host body to be sent back to, the witch's energy faded from this world. After this, many days passed without a trace of the last three witches. He was running low on supplies and decided to stop at a nearby village. He was greeted like a hero. Word had spread about his quest, and not only did the elders replenish his supplies, but they threw a feast in his honor. The whole village turned out for the feast. There was much celebration, and Gunskaliski felt himself at ease. Then he caught a glimpse at something gone so fast that he wasn't sure he had seen it at all. A small, bright red glow. He was just about to dismiss it as the reflection of one of the many campfires when he saw it again, in the back of the crowd. It was the scar from the arrow he shot through the witch's neck. She had hidden it well, but now that he was looking, it was clear. Unlike the others, she had chosen to hide in plain sight, as the saying goes. If the elders hadn't made sure that everyone attended the feast, he may never have found her. He was careful to avoid eye contact. Instead, he told the village elder what he saw. The man was shocked. The woman had lived there many years. But he trusted the medicine man and set two braves to track the woman's movements through the night. Later, after the feast, the village elder accompanied him to her cottage, and together they killed her. Only Kanuna and Noya remained. But they had not been marked. Gunskaliski was hunting blind. He continued to search for a full month before admitting defeat. He returned home and reported to the council, but they said that ridding the world of 4 raven mockers was not a failure. He should be proud, but he wasn't. The 2 missing witches remained in his thoughts. He went about his daily tasks as if he were in a daze. All his waking thoughts were spent on the raven mockers. Then, one day, a brave returned from a week of hunting. He didn't simply return to the village. He sprinted back to the village, panting and out of breath. He was nearly on the verge of collapse when the family called for Gunskaliski, the medicine man. When the hunter saw him, he was beside himself. All he could say before passing out was, "Raven mockers." Gunskaliski felt his heart skip a beat, but he could do nothing but wait for the man to revive. When he did, he told his story. The brave told of seeing a cottage in the woods inhabited by an elderly couple. Later, he had engaged in a hunt, tracking a deer. He lost the deer's trail and found himself deep in the woods, far away from the village. He went back to the cottage, but the couple were nowhere to be found. He didn't want to disturb their bed, so he curled up in a corner of the room and went to sleep. He woke late that night to the sound of ravens, and the couple returned moments later. The man carried a bundle, and when he unwrapped it, the brave saw that it contained a heart, a human heart. He knew what that meant. Knowing there was nowhere for him to hide, he pretended to be asleep. They noticed him in the corner and demanded to know why he was there. He, more or less, told them the truth, that he needed a place to rest, and they weren't home. He apologized for the inconvenience and started to leave. They tried to stop him, but they were in their human form, weak. He pushed past them and ran into the woods. It was still a couple hours until dawn. He wasn't safe. He knew they would come for him. As soon as the brave ran out of the door, Kanuna and Noya felt odd. Something wasn't right. He knew. They felt the spell start to break. Noya threw up. They had survived for decades, centuries, and now everything is coming to an end. Noya threw up again, and then she got mad. They both did. They transformed into their true forms and went after the brave. He ran as fast as he could. He couldn't see them, but he could hear the ravens. He jumped into the river, hoping the water would cover his scent. There was brush by the shore, and he ducked up underneath it, not knowing if they had the power to spot him or not. The raven mocker took flight, perhaps their last one. Normally, their magical sight would have led them right to the man, but their magic was failing them. They searched the woods until dawn approached, and then they were forced to return to their bodies. The brave was relatively safe during the day, but at night, he could hear them searching for him. This continued for 3 days until he made it back to their village. He led Gunskaliski and a group of warriors back to the cottage in the woods. However, when they arrived, the witches were already dead, victims of their own curse. To learn more about this story, check out Cherokee Myths and Legends by Terry L. Norton. There's also Spooky North Carolina, Tales of Haunting, Strange Happenings, and Other Local Lore by S.E. Schlosser. And check out ancientpages.com. This episode was researched and written by Jeffrey Cochran and was produced and hosted by me, Dan Sellers. You can find every episode of the Carolina Haints podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and YouTube. Or you can listen directly from the feed at carolinahaints.libsyn.com. Please be sure to leave us a review and share it with a friend. As always, you can learn more about us and the Carolina Haints book at our website, carolinahaints.com, or feel free to check the official Facebook page at facebook.com/carolinahaints. And as always, you can contact us directly at carolinahaints@gmail.com. We'll be making some new announcements soon about our expansion of Carolina Haints in bringing legends and lore historical markers around the Carolinas. Sounds pretty cool, right? Well, you can be a part of it. Just check out our Patreon page and find a way that you can contribute. We offer some pretty cool stuff in return, like monthly mini episodes, behind-the-scenes looks at the show, and our very own map of monsters and legends. All of these perks can be yours exclusively through our Patreon. Just visit patreon.com/carolinahaints. Speaking of Patreon, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank our pal, Richard Church. I got to meet Richard last October at one of our speaking engagements, and he's since joined the team as our first Patreon member. Thank you so much, Richard. It means the world to have your support. We'll be back in 2 weeks with a new episode. Tune in then to hear more about those things that go bump in the night. Every night